Hey guys, starting part 3 on our exercise hydration lecture. Again, we're talking about drink to thirst or drink to schedule. I kind of touched upon that with regards to the part 2 part of this lecture, but I want to talk a little bit more about drink scheduling and tie it in a big bow. So with regards to drink scheduling, as we learned in the previous lecture part, that a high sodium carbohydrate electrolyte beverage is much safer to use via the drink scheduling method. Not only much safer, but also can increase performance because of the constant delivery of carbohydrates into your bloodstream and minimizing glycogen burn. So, but to determine proper drink scheduling, you have to know your sweat rate or approximate sweat rate and how much fluid you lose. All right, so I've put up a little um, bullet point here that will tell you how to calculate that. Um, so first of all, we're going to want to I'll give you an example here. The difference in body mass prior to and after exercise for this person, 75 kilo before, he was 72 after, which means that there's a 3 kilo difference. And to round everything else to make things nice and tidy, 3 kilos is approximately 3 liters. All right, approximately 3 liters of loss. All right, so just to make it real easy, if you lose 3 kilos, you lose 3 liters. If you lose 1 kilo, you lose 1 liter. However, you're going to want to void your bladder and your stomach prior to determining how much you've lost. Reason being is because that can skew really the amount of body water that you've lost. For example, if you have a full bladder and you weigh yourself prior to uh, exercising, that fluid is really is not going. Once it's in your bladder, it's not going to be resorbed. So that would artificially inflate your weight. All right. So you want to void the bladder, void the stomach when you take both measurements. All right. So we want to, for example, in this person, it's 3 liters, right? So 75 kilos before and 72 kilos after, and they voided their bladder and voided their stomach. They lost 3 kilos, which is equivalent to 3 liters. So what we want to do is we want to add in the mass of exercise fluid consumption, and that, let's say you drink 1.5 liters during this exercise session. So this is, do not forget this. This is vitally important because this fluid just doesn't go anywhere. All right, it has to be accounted for. And so that the total loss, if you end up with a 3 kilogram or 3 liter reduction at the end of your exercise session, and you've consumed 1.5 liters of fluid, the real loss is 4.5 liters. All right, the real loss is 4.5 liters. And so that is what you must use to determine your sweat rate. Okay, and let's say this exercise session lasted over 3 hours. So 4.5 liters of total fluid loss divided by 3 hours, that's a 1.5 liter per hour sweat rate. All right, 1.5 liter per hour sweat rate. So the question bears in mind that can we replace 1.5 liters per hour or even more? And unfortunately, via gastric emptying, we cannot empty much more than 1.5 liters. So about 25 mLs per minute is about it in terms of fluid delivery via gastric emptying. So 1.5 liters would be typically your max. And so you can shoot for this, but not everybody's the same. And that if you do find you're accumulating fluid in your gut from drinking 1.5 liters per hour, then it is by all means, it's safe to consume a little bit less. You might be slightly hypohydrated, but it will not amount to 2% or greater. Okay, and that's really the bottom line. And so what I tell people is 2 small bottles per hour, provided that the carbohydrate electrolyte beverage is proper in terms of how fast it can empty from your gut. All right, and not all carbohydrate electrolyte beverages are the same. Some are slower emptying than others. All right, so keep that in mind. So by determining your sweat rate, all right, then you can go on to see, okay, how can I either maintain euhydration or minimize hypohydration? All right, and so remember, some people may tell you that it's okay to hypohydrate a great deal, but also remember that the energy that you're consuming, unless you're eating solid food, which I do not recommend if you're exercising intensely for long periods of time, gels are a lot more gentle on your stomach and so on and so forth. You're going to need to keep up with the energy demands and not just the fluid demands. Okay, so if your sweat rate was 1.5 liters per hour, then and you wanted to try 1.5 liters per hour, then by all means. But if you start to accumulate fluid in your stomach, then you can take that down a little bit and just basically minimize your the amount or hypohydration. Like 2 small bottles is about 1.24 liters per hour. So you could do 2 small bottles per hour, and that would suffice, provided the exercise session isn't 24 hours, right? So in which case you might get to that 2% of hypohydration. Minimal hypohydration to euhydration should be the goal for performance. All right, it is not necessary in terms of survival. A lot of people might tell you that it's okay to hypohydrate to a greater extent with no problems, and that for evolutionary perspective, we only drink to thirst. Well, for evolutionary perspectives, we weren't riding bikes for 100 miles, and we weren't running for running marathons. And so our bodies, although we may have run marathons in the past, it is not something that we've evolved to do. And so that the thirst mechanism is really there for survival, to maintain your blood osmolality or your blood thickness, make sure it stays at a certain level of dilution. But it is not there in terms of maintaining exercise performance, all right? That is not an evolutionary perspective. So keep that in mind. So in conclusion, if performance is a priority, body mass losses should be limited to 2% or less. Some literature suggests 2% or less. The majority of literature suggests 3%. All right, so since there is not a problem with staying euhydrated in performance, and performance is a priority in terms of exercise sessions and races, you just best to stay on the safe side, adhere to literature, and shoot for 2% or less. All right, but remember, depending on your sweat rate, euhydration may not be achievable, but again, it should be striven for. Okay, and I'll give you an example. There's many things that determine sweat rate: intensity, all right, body type, also the environment itself, also how much clothing or the evaporative potential of the clothing. All right, these are all factors, velocity, movement velocity, all factors in determining sweat rate. And so my advice is to check your sweat rate in a variety of conditions and then shoot for a number that is going to become close to, if not maintaining, euhydration. Okay, and plasma volume can be stored up to 1.5 liters an hour via gastric emptying. Okay, so if you're one of those heavy sweaters, again, you may not be able to replace it all, but you're going to want to replace as much as you can, because that will, then you're gonna get to that 2% or that hypohydrated 2% or more at a later time during your exercise session. All right, so drink. The take-home message is drink as much as you can, but there is a limit to how much you can empty, and a lot of this is not only determined on the drink itself, but also individual differences. All right, so you need to experiment with that. But most individuals can, with a proper carbohydrate electrolyted drink, can empty 2 small bottles per hour. All right, a high sodium carbohydrate electrolyte drink versus water can increase endurance performance via safer drink scheduling, which ultimately results in decreased glycogen utilization, by maintaining blood glucose, by maintaining hydration status, which increases the amount of fat that you're utilizing, therefore sparing glycogen again, maintaining a VO2 max, so you have that kick at the end of a race, and also decreasing the perception of effort during exercise. So again, depending on what you drink, you need to make the choice as to which ideology is best to follow. But in terms of performance, a high sodium carbohydrate electrolyte drink that is scheduled via your own particular sweat rate is the best choice. All right, I hope you've enjoyed this 3-part series. There will be more to come in the future. Take care. Thank you.